All right, folks, welcome back to the Hoplite channel. I am your host. Appreciate you coming back, or if this is your first time, thanks for making it. We are right now in the second part of the three-part series I'm doing on the Stoic Titans. We concluded the first part of the series with Seneca. We did on anger and on clemency. And now we're moving into the second part of the series with our second Titan, Epictetus. This is part one of Epictetus. I know what the nerds are saying already. Yeah, it's actually pronounced Epictetus. That's how it's supposed to sound, Epictetus. I say Epictetus. You say Epictetus. We can all get along. I control this up here, so Epictetus is what I'm going to go with. So we'll begin with Epictetus in this series, and let's talk about him over a little bio. So Epictetus was born in 50 AD in Hierapolis, Phrygia. This is in modern-day Turkey, and he died in 135 AD in Necropolis, Greece. So pretty good life. You know, he made it just to around 80, which in those days, yeah, that was a good long life. But as we see from the beginning, his start was quite different than the other Stoics. He was actually born into slavery. We don't know his real name, his birth name, as it was given to him. The Greek word Epictetus, means acquired. So his name derives from like property being acquired. We do know that he spent his youth in Rome, and he was owned by a freedman named Epictetus. Epictetus himself, as a freedman, was once a slave like Epictetus, but somehow or another he managed to secure his freedom, went on to become wealthy, and ironically enough, he was secretary of Nero. And if you remember from the previous series, Seneca was the tutor of Nero. So here you have a secretary of Nero, Seneca's tutoring Nero. Epictetus, who would go on to become the next Titan of Stoic philosophy, is a slave in the employ of Epictetus. Small world. So how did Epictetus get into Stoic philosophy? Well, Epictetus noticed there was a intelligence about Epictetus. He was curious. He was thirsty for knowledge, and he enjoyed philosophy. So Epictetus, being I guess as good an owner as one could hope in Rome, allowed Epictetus to study and to learn. So Epictetus chose to study Stoicism under another Stoic by the name of Musonius Rufus, or just Rufus. Rufus. That reference is going to date me, but I'm throwing it in there. It's going to be in there. All right. So he studied Stoicism under Rufus, and as luck would have it for Epictetus, Nero, from the previous series we know, committed suicide in 68. Therefore, Epictetus, as secretary, no longer, I guess, had need of Epictetus as a slave, so he was freed in 68. And he began to teach Stoicism in Rome at this time, which was, good for him. He had learned enough from Rufus. He enjoyed the study of Stoicism so much so that he decided to devote his life's work to it. Unfortunately, another jerk showed up, Emperor Domitian. And Emperor Domitian decided that, I've seen these emperors come and go in my time, and I think that the philosophers have something to do with revolution in Rome. People get it in their minds to do these things or think these thoughts, and I think the philosophers are behind it. So you know what? I'm just going to ban them. They're gone. They're out. And in 93 AD, all philosophers were banned from the city of Rome. Epictetus said, well, if I can't teach in Rome, I'm going to teach elsewhere. And that's what he did. He moved to Necropolis, Greece, where he spent the rest of his life, and he opened his own school of Stoic philosophy in Necropolis, which was great for him. He was free from the politics and the nonsense and the bustle of Rome that Seneca wasn't. He was free to teach and to take pupils in his school in Necropolis. And fortunately for him, he had a pupil by the name of Arrian. Now, Epictetus, unfortunately, kind of, thought the same way Socrates did in terms of philosophy. He would just show up, his students would gather around, and he would just, off the top of his head, because he was so brilliant, he would just, muse. He would, wax philosophic. And the students would just absorb the lessons. They would go about their day afterwards, and they would do it all again. Arrian decided, in the same way Plato decided for Socrates, we're not going to have the old man around forever, so I should probably write down what he's saying to us so that people who want to learn about his teachings later will have a record. And that's what he did. In 108 AD, he wrote 2 books that are a collection of Epictetus's lessons and Stoic philosophy. These are the Discourses, which we're going to read from in a minute, and the Enchiridion. They're both great books, 2 must-haves, again, for your Stoic library. The Discourses, yeah, absolutely, without a doubt. If I could recommend one of the 2, the Discourses we're going to read from here, invaluable. Yeah, very good. Okay, so according to his students, Epictetus lived a peaceful life towards the end. He had few possessions. He had few wants and desires, which was in line with Stoicism. And the rumor was he actually took a young man, a boy, into his care and adopted him. Yeah, he raised the kid and saved him from the streets. And the legend goes that if Epictetus hadn't done that, there's a good chance the boy probably would have died in the street. So maybe Epictetus saw himself, in the young boy and decided that he was not going to let the boy be sold into slavery or, some other calamity, take him. He was going to raise the boy and make sure he had a decent life. So that was a good thing he did. What are the major influences that Epictetus had? Well, the first one we know of is Emperor Hadrian. Unlike Domitian and Nero, Hadrian, was a decent emperor by most accounts. Famous for Hadrian's Wall, of course, everyone knows that. But Hadrian was friendly with Epictetus. They were contemporaries. They got along. And the account was that Hadrian either in secret or in public traveled to Necropolis so that he could hear Epictetus give his lectures on Stoicism. So imagine that. You are born into slavery, right? You are freed, kicked out of Rome because you're a philosopher. You form your own school, and who but the Emperor of Rome himself later comes to your school to hear you talk? Yeah, pretty wild. Life is strange like that. Who else did Epictetus influence? Well, another emperor who we're going to get to, Marcus Aurelius. Marcus is, as far as the Titans go, I think he stands above the rest, but I think he stands above the rest because he had the other 2 leading the way. I really do. But Marcus, to his credit, gives a lot of credit to Epictetus for his Stoic philosophy, his inspiration, his knowledge. He cites him often, so we definitely know that Marcus Aurelius found inspiration and leadership in the Stoic philosophy from the works of Epictetus. And then lastly, early Christian scholars too. St. Augustine of Hippo, we know, drew a lot of inspiration from the Greek philosophers, Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, and Epictetus from Stoics. There is a lot of Stoic philosophy woven into the fabric of Christian ideology, Christian dogma, and the teachings of Christ and the Church. So we can thank Epictetus for these major influences among many others. So let's read a few passages from the Discourses. We'll talk about it really quick. Said that before. But I'll get to more of the personal philosophy of Epictetus in part 2. We'll read more from the Discourses, but I'll kind of get more into his impact on Stoicism. We know that Seneca gave us on anger, on clemency, and others, but we'll get more into Epictetus's personal philosophy as it pertains to Stoicism. So we'll go to the Discourses, and we'll read from chapter 2, page 8 and 9. You have to understand that when Arrian was writing these Discourses, it wasn't like Seneca, where it was going to be a book dedicated to anger or clemency. These were just chapters dedicated to individual lessons, so they kind of skip around. But I will reference the chapter name before I read the passage. Okay, this chapter is entitled, How is One to Preserve One's True Character in Everything? And this is brief. He writes, quote, "For it is you who know yourself, and what value you set upon yourself, and at what rate you sell yourself. For different people sell themselves at different prices." That's true, right? You are what you profess yourself to be. In your mind, your self-worth should be what you sell yourself at, right? If I'm worth this and I can demonstrate that worth, that should be what I hold myself out as. You know, people oftentimes convince themselves they're not worth as much as they are. They hold themselves out less than what they could be because they have self-doubt, they have regret over mistakes they've made, and they have fear over what the future could hold for them. Epictetus was born into slavery, right? So obviously he wasn't being sold for anything. He was already sold and he was bought and paid for. But as he grew older and as he became wiser in life, he knew what he was worth. And obviously people thought he was worth a lot because they would come all the way to Necropolis, Greece, as Hadrian did, just to hear him speak. So as he says to the Stoic, you set your own price in life. Don't look to anyone else or their opinions about you as to what you're worth and what you're not worth. You set your own worth, and you've got to think about that up here. You can't set yourself too high, and you shouldn't set yourself too low. You need to figure out who you are, what you're doing in this world, and what value you bring to it. Okay, we'll move to chapter 24. This is on page 55, and this chapter is on how should we struggle against difficulties. Okay, and he says, quote, "Remember that the door is open. Do not be more cowardly than children, but just as they say, when the game no longer pleases them, I will play no more. You too, when things seem that way to you, should merely say, I will play no more, and so depart. But if you stay, stop moaning." Yeah, all right. So that one, that one kind of goes to the person who, doesn't see the world working out for them, and they just say, well, this isn't fair. Life sucks. Why does he have everything and I have nothing? Why does she get this and I work twice as hard and get half that? This is like a game. Life is like a game in a way that if you don't like the rules and if you don't like the way things are going, no one's keeping you here. And like a kid, why don't you take your ball and go home? Because it's not going to get any easier, and people aren't going to change the rules for you. So if you're going to stay in the game, pick up the ball, start playing, be the best you can be, but stop moaning, because no one is coming to pick you up when you skin your knee, and no one's going to call a timeout when you need a breather. He knew this as a slave. Life wasn't going to be easy for him. Luckily enough, he was freed because after Epictetus decided that, no longer did he need him in his employ, and Nero had died and the emperor had become someone else, this was a new chance. This was a new lease on life. But in all his time, no accounts exist of Epictetus saying, well, my life was awful and I should have just given up. I really wish that things had been better for me and then life had been more fair. You could say in his case, among the three titans, life was the most unfair. But he played the game and he did not moan about it. So good inspiration from Epictetus on that account. Okay, next one. We go to chapter 28. This is page 64. This chapter is on that we should not be angry with others, and what things are great and what small amongst men. Okay, he begins. When was Achilles undone? When Patroclus died? By no means. But when he gave himself up to rage, when he wept over a paltry girl, when he forgot that he came there not to get mistresses, but to make war. These are the ways in which human beings are undone. This is the siege. This the razing of a man's city, when his right judgments are demolished, when they are destroyed. Okay, this harkens back to the video I did, the two videos rather, on Seneca's works concerning on anger. when was Achilles taken away by rage? When it was Patroclus dying, or when he just decided to give up his good sense? If you look back to the Iliad, which is that's going to take an hour-long video, but when you read Homer and the description of Achilles, it was his rage that killed him. He lost Patroclus, a relative, and a patriot on behalf of Greece. He was a brother in arms, and he was a brother of flesh. Seeing him die was too painful for him to get over, so he gave himself over to rage instead. And the gods decided that he would die in Troy. He could have gone home to Greece. He could have waged the war. He could have been a hero and won many other battles after that, but he had to take Troy. He had to follow through with his rage. It wasn't enough to kill Hector. He had to help the Greeks sack Troy. He had to be there to watch it burn. And Athena guided that arrow from Paris's bow into Achilles' heel. And the poison on that tipped arrow killed him. But it did it? Was it the arrow, or was it the fact that Achilles could not control his rage? He could not keep himself from going after that which was going to lead to his undoing. Something to think about. Okay, last one for the video. This is chapter 29, page 67. This chapter is entitled On Steadfastness. Okay, right. It begins. But prove to me that one who holds inferior judgments can prevail over a man who is superior in his judgments. You will never prove it, nor anything like it, for the law of nature and of God is this: let the better always be superior to the worse. In what? In that in which is better. One body is stronger than another. A number of people are stronger than a single person, and a thief is stronger than one who is not a thief. Thus I, too, lost my lamp because the thief was better at keeping awake than I. But he bought a lamp at the price of being a thief, a rogue, and a brute. That seemed to him a good bargain. Okay, what is he saying there? That's a little cryptic, but I think we can kind of parse it out. He's saying, like, who is inferior to whom? It's like, well, he says the one who has inferior judgments, someone who makes worse decisions, someone who is in less control of their mind, someone who has given themselves over to passions, to desires, to negative emotions. And so too is the same way a thief is weaker than the person he robs. He says here, thus I too lost my lamp because the thief was better at keeping awake. So the thief was better at staying awake. You eventually, because you're an honest man, are going to go to bed. But the thief, because he wants your lamp, will steal it out from under you while you're asleep. He bought a lamp at the price of being a thief, a rogue, and a brute. That seemed to him a good bargain, right? So in exchange for being an immoral man, what did he gain? He gained a lamp. The person loses their lamp, right? But they keep themselves above the vice of robbery, above theft. Was it a good bargain to give yourself up to this crime of thievery, of being a thief? He says no. The better judgment, if the thief is going to keep himself awake in exchange for stealing your lamp and all he's going to get out of it is being a robber, so be it. The man of superior judgment, the one who allows himself to be robbed or carried away by 10 angry people, is still superior, despite the fact everybody watching it may assume the opposite. Okay, good stuff. Cryptic, but good. This is part one, Epictetus. We'll go, I said, into part two. We'll talk more about the Stoic philosophy, the points that Epictetus regarded as extremely vital for the Stoic soul, the Stoic philosopher. And we'll pick up with part two next time. Once again, if you're liking this stuff, give it a thumbs up, share it, leave a comment, all that stuff. Yeah, maybe we'll get this thing going. People can get more interested in Stoic philosophy in these days, and there could be maybe a renaissance in the works. Who knows? Anyway, once again, thanks for coming by, and take it easy.